Well, it hasn't been a burning issue at all, and that's why it's been such a surprise. Only last week, the Secretary of State for Defence said there was no ideas, no plans at all for national service. And then 48 hours, the Prime Minister, without telling anybody, announces new plans for national service. And even the Prime Minister can't explain how they're going to make volunteering compulsory.
And that's such a good point to take us through. So first of all, he says 18 months, a year in national service, or every weekend making 18-year-olds do voluntary service. It just seems like a very strange idea.
It's very confused. All of the current government ministers are totally confused. 30,000 young people apparently can go into the armed forces. The armed forces have already said they don't want young people. They're overstretched as it is. To take somebody and train them for a year on the basis that then they'll leave is not going to help the British Armed Forces. And yet compare that with just one weekend a month, it just seems a mess. And actually the bigger picture here is very simple. Rishi Sunak is struggling to connect with older voters who will not be affected by this policy, but love the idea of national service.
Yeah, so it's sort of harking back to that sort of time when that was probably mandatory, what it hasn't been since the 60s. I mean, when you've seen some of the funny memes and videos that have been circulating, it seems that young people themselves just seem to think it's a joke. So it's a disconnect for young people as well.
Well, actually, the funny thing is, I think it might actually be a reconnect, because the great challenge for the Labour Party was to get young people to bother voting. And what Rishi Sunak has done is given the Labour Party the biggest ever gift, that all young people are definitely going to make sure they vote now, because they do not want to do this national service.
Absolutely. You know, we talked about some of the triggers of migration and other things that he's been pulling. He's also targeting sickness and disability benefits, saying there's a sick note culture. How has that gone down?
Again, it's gone down as fairly desperate, really. The Conservatives have been in government for a long time. There is a real problem in the UK, as there is in other parts of the world, with what we call good jobs. Good, secure, permanent, well-paid jobs, as opposed to short-term contracts in and out of work. So there are lots of people out there not working, but generally they're really trying hard to get into a very precarious employment market. And again, what this is all about, it's red meat politics. It's trying to throw policies to the far right of the party and to older people, and it's looking quite desperate.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Parliament is due to be dissolved tomorrow. Are the parties, do you feel, ready to swing into action? I mean, just to your point that Rishi Sunak isn't seeming to be to sort of even consulting his party, it seems a bit of a worry as to how this campaign's going to play out.
It's a very strange situation, and I think the campaign itself may well be fairly flat. The interesting thing is many within the Conservative Party have almost given up already. There's a real sense of lots of MPs announcing they're leaving, they're moving on, lots of people saying it would be best for the Conservative Party to take a year out of government, a term out, to recharge, reset, bring in the next generation. The flip side is the Labour Party. At the moment, the Labour Party are 28 points ahead on the basis of having no policies.
Yeah, which is quite disturbing. They may be keeping their tinder dry, but it's a funny thing to have to trust. To your point, there are lots of big retirements coming up, particularly on the Conservative side. I suspect a lot of people have sort of felt that there wasn't going to be a chance for re-election. Are there going to be noteworthy recruits, do you think? Are they going to be able to pull fresh blood in?
Well, the Conservative Party is generally pretty good at talent spotting, talent management, bringing people in. But there's no real clear, visible next cohort. And in many ways, that's what 5 years will give them a chance to bring that new generation onwards. It's also a big challenge for the Labour Party at the moment, even though the Labour government seems to be heading, flowing, flying into government. Actually, the public don't really know anybody in the shadow cabinet at the moment beyond Keir Starmer, maybe the shadow chancellor. So there's a real challenge for the next government probably to increase the awareness of those ministers with the public out there.
Yeah. Well, of course, there may be a televised debate. Do you think we'll get a better sense of what they stand for in terms of particularly Keir Starmer, if there is one?
Well, yes, the quiet man will be forced to stand and talk, although, you know, it's very interesting. There is this big debate about Keir Starmer, and he's seen as slightly boring, technocratic, uncharismatic, and yet that really reflects that he's a pragmatist. And in many ways, the Labour Party is moving back from the televised debates, because really, Sunak will have nothing to lose. At the moment, it's really up to Keir Starmer to sort of play it very safe. And we have this phrase here about sort of carrying a piece of very expensive Ming china and not dropping it. At the moment, Keir Starmer is carrying his Ming china, and he's not saying anything, no policy debates. He's keeping it as safe as possible. The problem with the televised debate is that will be risky for Keir holding his china, because he won't know exactly what's coming at him.
Yes, I love that analogy. Matthew, we'll watch with interest to see if that china smashes at any point. Good to have you on.
Good to be here.